I wasn't dead. But for a whole year they thought I was. I found out about Claire's affair on a Tuesday. A stupid, regular Tuesday. Her phone lit up while she was in the shower. I miss you already. Last night was amazing. From Ryan. Ryan. A name I didn't recognize at first. But that changed quickly. A few clicks, a quick search, and there he was, our neighbor. A friend. Someone I had beers with. Someone who sat across from me at dinner parties, laughing at my jokes while sleeping with my wife behind my back. I stared at that message for a long time, my fingers twitching over the screen. I could delete it, pretend I never saw it. Or I could take a screenshot, send it to Claire, and start a war right then and there. But something stopped me. What would happen if I confronted her? She'd deny it at first, then cry. Maybe even blame me. Say I'd been distant, that I hadn't made her feel loved enough. Eventually she'd admit it, say it was a mistake, promise it was over. And maybe it was. Or maybe it wasn't. But what then? Divorce? Lawyers? Splitting assets? Fighting over the house? Paying alimony? That was too easy for her. Instead, a different thought crept into my mind. A colder one. A better one. What if I just disappeared? I went about the rest of my night like nothing had changed. I put her phone back exactly how I found it, then went to the kitchen and made dinner. When she came downstairs, fresh out of the shower, she kissed my cheek and asked how my day was. I looked at her. At the woman I had loved for the last 10 years. At the woman who, just hours ago, had been in another man's bed. My day was fine, I said, forcing a smile. How was yours? She smiled back, lied to my face. And right then I made my decision. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to let her turn this around on me. I was going to vanish. That night I barely slept. Claire was next to me, peacefully breathing, her arm draped over my chest. I used to love the feeling of her warmth. Now it made my skin crawl. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Every second that passed, my anger turned into something else: clarity. If I wanted to disappear, I had to do it right. No half measures. No chance of getting caught. I started withdrawing cash. A few hundred at a time, never from the same ATM, never more than what could be brushed off as normal spending. Claire didn't notice. She was too busy sneaking around with Ryan. I followed her one night. I told her I had to stay late at work, then parked a few streets away and waited. Sure enough, an hour later, she left the house, all dressed up, her makeup done just a little too perfectly. I tailed her to a hotel. Watched as she walked into the lobby. Watched as Ryan met her there, placing a hand on the small of her back like he owned her. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. It took everything in me not to storm in and put my fist through his teeth. But I took a deep breath. Swallowed my rage. And then I took pictures instead. Proof. Not just for me. Not just for revenge. But because if I was going to disappear, I needed leverage. Just in case. The night I vanished, Claire was already asleep when I got home. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her. Wondering if she even felt guilty. Wondering if she ever thought about how much she was hurting me. Probably not. I walked to the bathroom, took off my wedding ring, and placed it on the counter. Then I grabbed the bag I had packed weeks ago and slipped out the front door. My car was found the next morning near the old bridge outside town. The keys were still in the ignition. My wallet was on the passenger seat. The driver's side door was slightly open, just enough to suggest something had happened. A struggle. A suicide. A disappearance. The police got involved. They searched the woods, dragged the river. Claire gave a tearful interview on the news, begging for anyone to come forward. Ryan stood behind her, playing the supportive friend. I watched it all from a dingy motel room 100 miles away. They didn't know it yet. But their nightmare was just beginning. Disappearing wasn't as simple as walking out the door. People underestimate how much planning it takes to truly erase yourself. Every credit card swipe, every phone call, every login leaves a trail. If I wanted Claire and Ryan to believe I was truly gone, I had to cover my tracks perfectly. I couldn't just leave, that would be suspicious. If I packed a bag and walked out, Claire would assume I'd run away, maybe to punish her. That wasn't enough. She needed to believe I was dead. So, I made sure my exit told a different story. The night before I vanished, I made my final withdrawals. A little over $10,000 in cash, small enough to not raise alarms, big enough to keep me afloat. My phone, my wallet, my car, every trace of me would be left behind. I wanted to give them a mystery, something that would eat at them. The last time Claire saw me, I kissed her goodnight. She barely mumbled a response before rolling over. The next morning I was gone. The car was the most important part. If I simply abandoned it, police might assume I'd left voluntarily. But if I staged it just right, they'd consider other possibilities, ones that would make Claire panic. I left the driver's door slightly open, the engine still running, my wallet on the passenger seat. A single shoe tossed nearby, close to the bridge railing. Not too obvious, just suggestive. Enough to plant the idea that I had jumped. I imagined how it would play out. Some jogger or early morning commuter would see the idling car, stop to check, maybe call the police. Within an hour or two, the area would be swarming with cops. By the time Claire even realized I was missing, the whole town would be buzzing about my disappearance. I stood there for a moment, staring at the scene I had created. The last trace of Daniel Parker. Then I walked away. There's a strange feeling that comes with erasing yourself. A mix of fear and exhilaration. I had no phone, no credit cards, nothing tying me to my old life. Just a bag of essentials, a stack of cash, and a new identity waiting for me in a safe deposit box 2 states over. I was nobody. I hitchhiked for the first few miles, then caught a bus out of town. No one even glanced at me. Just another traveler, another forgettable face. By the time the news broke, I was already gone. Claire reported me missing that evening. The police asked the usual questions. Had I been acting strange? Had I seemed depressed? Had we been fighting? She cried and shook her head. No, she told them, everything had been fine. She didn't understand. Why would he leave? Ryan was at her side immediately, playing the part of the concerned friend. It took 2 days for the local news to pick up the story. The missing husband. The abandoned car. The possibility of suicide. I sat in a cheap motel room, watching it unfold on TV. Claire's performance was decent. The tears were convincing enough. But it was the little details that caught my attention, the way she kept glancing at Ryan when she spoke, like she needed reassurance. The way her fingers clutched the edge of her sweater like she was forcing herself to look heartbroken. She wasn't grieving. She was waiting. Waiting to see if I would turn up. Waiting to see if anyone would suspect the truth. Waiting for the moment she and Ryan could finally be together without sneaking around. It made me sick. But I wasn't done yet. In the days that followed, the search continued. They dragged the river. Sent search dogs into the woods. But with no body, no leads, the case started to lose momentum. I imagined Claire lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering, is he really dead? Or is he out there somewhere, watching? I wanted her to wonder. And I wasn't just watching, I was documenting. I created fake accounts, new social media profiles, new email addresses. Slowly, carefully, I started collecting information. Claire and Ryan weren't exactly discreet. They thought they were free now, that their biggest obstacle, me, was out of the way. I watched as Ryan started coming around more often. How, just a few weeks later, he stayed the night. How Claire's mourning period seemed to shrink day by day. 3 months after I disappeared, she stopped wearing her wedding ring. 6 months in, Ryan moved in. By the time a year had passed, they were engaged. That was my cue. For an entire year, I had been nothing but a ghost. Watching. Waiting. Letting them think they had won. But now, it was time to come back. Claire was a grieving widow for exactly 3 months and 14 days. I counted every single one. At first, she played the part beautifully. The weeping wife, heartbroken and confused. She did the interviews, posted about her devastation on social media, and even attended a candlelight vigil in my honor. She let friends and family rally around her, nodding through their comforting words. But I knew Claire, and I knew that behind all that sadness, she was waiting. Waiting for the moment when people would stop looking. Waiting for the moment when she could finally have Ryan without hiding it. I sat in a motel room 200 miles away, watching every second of it unfold. The first few weeks were the hardest. Police were still actively searching, and the news was constantly running updates. The loving wife act was at its peak then. But cracks started to show. I noticed it in little things. The way she stopped looking so tired in interviews. The way her grief posts on social media started slowing down. The way she stopped checking in with police as often. And then, right on schedule, Ryan started showing up. At first, it was small. He came over to comfort her, to check in on his dear friend's wife. He played the role of the supportive shoulder to cry on. They were seen together at the grocery store, at a cafe, standing just close enough that people would feel sympathy, not suspicion. 3 months in, Ryan started spending nights at my house. My house. That was the moment I knew for sure Claire hadn't just moved on. She was relieved. It was sickening how quickly they settled into their new life. By month 5, Ryan was practically living there. By month 6, he officially moved in. The cops had stopped calling Claire by then. Without any new evidence, my case had gone cold. They still considered me a missing person, but by that point, everyone had their own theories. Some thought I had run away. Others believed I had jumped. Claire? She wasn't losing sleep over it. She and Ryan had a brand new life, one they didn't have to sneak around for anymore. They went on vacations. Had dinners with friends. They even redecorated the house. She painted over the walls I had painted. She threw away the couch I had picked out. She made it like I was never there at all. And for a whole year, I let her. I let her believe she had won. I let her believe that life had given her a second chance at happiness. I let her believe I was never coming back. The night she announced their engagement, I laughed. A real, deep, genuine laugh. I had been waiting for this moment. She posted the news on Facebook, some overly perfect, staged photo of her hand in Ryan's, a diamond sparkling on her finger. The caption was short and simple. Forever? The comment section was filled with congratulations, heart emojis, and support from friends and family. They felt for her. They believed in her story. Her husband had been missing for a year. It was so tragic. She deserved happiness. Ryan had liked the post within minutes. Claire's mom left a comment saying she was so happy Claire had found love again. I scrolled through every single comment, my grin widening. Perfect. I wanted them to believe their nightmare was over. I wanted them to feel safe. Because in 2 weeks, at their engagement party, I was coming back. Claire had no idea I was watching her. She had no idea that every time she kissed Ryan in public, I was there. That every time she posted a picture of their new beginning, I was saving it. That every single second of their stolen happiness was being recorded, documented, and stored for the day I decided to burn their world down. I had spent the last year becoming a ghost, slipping between places unnoticed, keeping my head down. I wasn't just hiding. I was learning. I learned how to create new identities. How to disappear in plain sight. How to make people believe what I wanted them to believe. Most importantly, I learned patience. Revenge isn't about anger, it's about timing. So I let them think they had one. I let them redecorate my house. I let them sleep in my bed. I let Ryan wear my clothes, the ones Claire didn't throw out. I let them build their perfect little life. Because the higher they climbed, the harder they would fall. And now, with their engagement party just days away, it was finally time. It wasn't enough to just come back. I needed to destroy them completely. I spent the last few months setting the stage. Quietly, carefully, without a single misstep. The first thing I did was create a new persona, someone untraceable, someone with no connection to my past life. A man with a different name, a different background, and most importantly, a reason to be there. I got a job as a bartender. Not at just any bar, at the very place hosting Claire and Ryan's engagement party. A high-end rooftop venue with a full staff, none of whom had ever met me before. None of whom had any reason to doubt my identity. It was almost too easy. A fake or a few lies about moving into town recently, and suddenly I was on the schedule. They didn't even look twice at me. On the night of the party, I stood behind the bar in a crisp black uniform, shaking cocktails and pouring champagne, invisible to everyone. Just another worker, another nameless face in the crowd. And then Claire walked in. She was dressed in white, A fitted dress that made her look like a bride already. She held onto Ryan's arm, her ring sparkling under the soft glow of the chandelier. People turned, smiling, clapping. Someone popped open a bottle of champagne. Her laughter rang through the room. I felt nothing. No pain, no sadness, no love. I had buried all of that a long time ago. Now, there was only the plan. I kept my head down, waiting. Watching. Every detail had to be perfect. I had spent the last few months collecting evidence, bank records, hotel receipts, screenshots of old messages. Proof of her affair. Proof that she had drained our joint accounts before I was even declared legally dead. Proof that she had moved on long before she put on the Widow Act. It was all neatly packaged, ready to be revealed at the perfect moment. But I had one final card to play. Something that would make sure no one ever looked at Claire the same way again. As the night went on, I watched them celebrate. Claire and Ryan were the center of attention, drinking, laughing, smiling for photos. Their perfect little fantasy. I waited until the speeches. Claire's best friend took the microphone first, sharing some sweet, sentimental story about how Claire deserved love again after everything she had been through. Ryan's brother went next, making a joke about how lucky Ryan was to have found someone as loyal and devoted as Claire. That one almost made me laugh. And then, just as Claire was about to take the microphone to thank everyone for coming, I stepped forward. Collected. Completely unnoticed until the moment I spoke. "Sorry I'm late," I said, my voice carrying through the speakers. "Hope I didn't miss anything important." The room fell silent. Claire's eyes found mine. The color drained from her face. She swayed slightly, her mouth opening, but no words came out. Ryan paled beside her, his grip tightening around his champagne glass. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." I smiled. "Miss me?" Claire looked like she had seen a ghost. For a year, she had lived in a world where I no longer existed. She had moved on, erased me, rewritten the story in a way that made her the victim. But now, here I was alive, standing in front of her, and stealing the spotlight at her engagement party. The microphone slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. The sound barely registered over the stunned silence that filled the room. Ryan's hand slowly lowered from where he had been holding his champagne glass, his knuckles white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I took my time. I walked forward, casual, like I was just another guest arriving fashionably late. People were whispering, shifting, looking between Claire, Ryan, and me like they had just stepped into a soap opera. Claire finally managed to speak, but her voice was weak, barely above a whisper. How am I alive?" I finished for her, tilting my head. "Funny question, Claire. I mean, I never actually died." I let that sink in, let the weight of my words press down on her. She had wanted me to be dead. It made everything easier for her. But now she had to explain herself. Ryan recovered faster than she did. He squared his shoulders, stepping in front of Claire slightly, like he was protecting her. "You need to leave," he said, his voice lower than usual, a forced calm that barely hid the panic underneath. I smiled. "But, am I ruining your big night?" His jaw clenched. Claire still hadn't moved. She was frozen, her hands trembling at her sides. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for help, looking for anyone who could make sense of this. I turned to the guests, scanning the familiar faces. Some I had known for years, friends, old co-workers, even a few of Claire's family members. "Sorry, everyone," I said, giving them a polite nod. "This must be confusing for you. Let me clear things up." Claire's breath hitched. She knew what was coming. I didn't disappear because I was unhappy. I didn't run away. I didn't even die. I took a step closer, watching Claire flinch. I left because my wife was cheating on me with him. I pointed directly at Ryan. For months, maybe even years. The crowd gasped. Claire let out a shaky breath, shaking her head rapidly. "Oh, that's not true." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? You sure?" I pulled my phone out of my pocket, holding up a screenshot of one of the many text messages I had saved. "Because this says otherwise. I can't wait to see you again. I miss your hands on my body." I turned the screen so the room could see it. Recognize that, Claire? You sent it to Ryan 2 weeks before I disappeared. Her face crumpled. Ryan stepped forward. This isn't the place, Dash. Oh, I think this is exactly the place. I cut him off. You see, Claire and Ryan have been lying to all of you for over a year. They played the grieving act real well. But the truth? They weren't mourning me. They were waiting for me to be declared legally dead so they could move on without guilt. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People were shifting uncomfortably, whispering to each other. Claire turned to her mother, who was standing near the front, eyes wide with horror. Mom, please, you have to believe me, Dash. Her mother stepped back. Claire's shoulders shook. I saw the exact moment she realized it she had already lost. The respect, the sympathy, the carefully crafted lie shattered in a matter of minutes. Ryan grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the microphone. We're leaving, he muttered. But I wasn't done. Oh, one more thing, I called out, stopping them in their tracks. You might want to check your accounts, Claire. Her body went rigid. I smiled wider. That's right. You see, while I was dead, I had plenty of time to go through our finances. Turns out, my loving wife committed fraud when she gained access to our joint assets after my disappearance. That's illegal, by the way. Her face went paper white. I spoke to a lawyer before I got here. There's a case being built against you as we speak. If I were you, I'd start worrying less about this party and more about your prison sentence. Dead silence. Then Claire did something unexpected. She turned on Ryan. You said no one would find out, she hissed, her voice low but sharp. Ryan whipped toward her. Me? You were the one who wanted to rush everything. Oh, this was beautiful. The perfect couple, the once inseparable partners in crime, cracking in front of everyone. I let out a small chuckle. Well, I'll leave you two to sort that out. I straightened my jacket, adjusting my sleeves. Have a great night, everyone. I know I will. And with that, I turned and walked away. Behind me, Claire's entire world crumbled. And I didn't look back. I stepped out of that engagement party without a scratch on me, but behind those doors, I knew Claire and Ryan's world was imploding. It was everything I had waited for, everything I had built toward. And yet, as I walked down the quiet city street, my heartbeat finally slowing, I realized something. I wasn't done. Destroying their reputations was a good start. But I wanted more. I wanted to make sure they felt it. I wanted them to suffer in a way they couldn't fix, couldn't lie their way out of. And I had already set the next phase in motion. Claire would check her accounts soon if she hadn't already. And when she did, she'd see what I had done. The money was gone. All of it. Claire had fraudulently accessed our joint accounts after I disappeared, shifting funds into her personal account to maintain the lifestyle she thought she deserved. Expensive trips, luxury dinners, new furniture for my house. She had spent it freely, believing I'd never come back to reclaim what was mine. What she didn't know was that I had never fully lost access. The second she started moving my money, I started tracking her. It took time, patience, and a few well-placed conversations with the right legal teams, but the result? Everything she had taken was legally mine again. Every dollar she had stolen had been funneled back into an untouchable account, transferred so smoothly that by the time she noticed, she was already bankrupt. I could only imagine the moment she saw her balance. Everything she had built with Ryan? Paid for with my money. The cars. The house renovations. The overpriced furniture. And now? Now she had nothing. I had left just enough for her to pay rent for a month, if she was smart. But knowing Claire? She'd spiral before she ever figured out how to fix it. Ryan, on the other hand, was a different kind of problem. I wasn't sure what their relationship was going to look like now that I had pulled the rug out from under them. Would they turn on each other? Or would he be stupid enough to try to fix things? I had a feeling I knew the answer. Ryan had always been smooth, quick with an excuse, fast on his feet. He tried to play it cool, convince Claire that they could get through this together. I wanted to make sure that wasn't an option. So I made a call. One I had been waiting to make for months. A few rings, then an answer. Yeah. The voice on the other end was deep, rough, someone who knew how to get things done. It's time, I said simply. There was a pause. Then a slow exhale. You sure? I glanced back at the building, imagining the chaos still unfolding inside. Claire's frantic voice, Ryan's poor attempts at damage control. I smiled. Yeah, I'm sure. The call ended. And just like that, the next phase was in motion. Ryan had a past one he had tried very hard to bury. Claire had no idea who she was actually engaged to, but she was about to find out. Claire was spiraling. I knew it before she did. She had always been the kind of person who needed control. Everything in her life had to be carefully curated: the perfect house, the perfect relationship, the perfect image. And now? She had none of it. Her money was gone. Her reputation was in ruins. Friends who had once supported her were now whispering behind her back, rereading old texts, replaying conversations, realizing that maybe, just maybe, Claire hadn't been the heartbroken widow they thought she was. And Ryan? Well, Ryan was about to have an even bigger problem. Because while Claire was watching her life collapse, he was about to pay for his sins in a very different way. I sat in a rented car, parked down the street from the house that used to be mine, watching. The lights were on, shadows moving behind the curtains. Arguing. Shouting. Claire had just learned what I had done to their finances, and from the way Ryan was pacing, he was not taking it well. But they wouldn't have time to recover before the next hit landed. I checked my phone. One new message. It's done. I smirked. Ryan had always liked to pretend he was clean-cut, professional, the kind of guy you'd trust with your money, your business, your wife. But that was never the full story. He had secrets. And I had found them. Old business deals that weren't exactly legal. Loans from people you don't just walk away from. The kind of debts that don't disappear just because you changed your zip code. I had spent months tracking them down. And tonight, I had made sure they remembered exactly who Ryan was. I didn't need to do anything violent. I wasn't that kind of man. But the people Ryan owed? They were. So I gave them what they wanted: a location, an updated address, a new place to collect what they were owed. It didn't take long. Ryan's car was parked outside. He had nowhere to run. And as I watched from a safe distance, a black SUV rolled to a slow stop in front of the house. Two men stepped out. Ryan didn't notice at first. But Claire did. She was still standing by the window, arms crossed, her body tense from the argument they had just had. But the moment she saw them, her entire posture changed. She said something to Ryan, motioning toward the window. Turned. And then? Panic. I watched as he rushed toward the back of the house, scrambling for a way out. Too late. They were already at the door. I didn't need to hear what was said. I could imagine it perfectly. The knock. The quiet, deadly voices. The reminder that debts had to be paid. Ryan would try to talk his way out of it. But the thing about people like him? Eventually, the lies stop working. And Claire? For the first time, she was seeing the real Ryan. Not the smooth-talking charmer. Not the confident businessman. Just a scared little man who had finally run out of options. I didn't wait to see how it ended. I already knew. I put my car in gear and drove away, leaving them to their fate. Claire had chosen him over me. Now she could deal with the consequences. Claire had spent her entire life thinking she was untouchable. She was the kind of person who believed she could talk her way out of anything. That no matter what happened, she'd land on her feet, looking perfect, blameless, and innocent. But the thing about people like Claire? They don't know what to do when the mask finally cracks. And now? It had shattered completely. I sat at a cafe the next morning, sipping my coffee, watching the news on a muted television in the corner. The headline at the bottom of the screen made me smile. Local businessman under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Right on schedule. Ryan's past wasn't just catching up to him, it was running him over at full speed. The men who had shown up at his house last night weren't just there for money. They were there for leverage. They wanted what was owed, and when Ryan couldn't pay, they decided to use him another way. I had made sure certain files ended up in the right hands. The authorities now had a clear, undeniable paper trail of every shady deal Ryan had made in the last 10 years. Bank statements, fake invoices, offshore accounts. The kind of evidence that doesn't just ruin reputations, it ruins lives. Ryan had spent so long pretending to be better than me. But he was looking at a possible prison sentence. I took another sip of my coffee, feeling more at peace than I had in years. I wondered if Claire had seen the news yet. She had bigger problems, though. I had made sure of that. By now, she would have gotten the call from her lawyer. The lawsuit was officially in motion. For identity theft, misuse of funds, all very serious charges, especially when paired with the financial destruction I had left in my wake. Claire was broke. The house would be seized within a month. The credit cards were maxed out. Her bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. She had spent the last year living a fantasy believing she had won, believing she had built something real with Ryan. But now she had nothing. And Ryan? Well, he had a different set of people to worry about. I had gotten everything I wanted. But there was still one final step. I wanted to see her. Not from a distance. Not through a screen. Face to face. I needed her to understand that this wasn't an accident. That it wasn't bad luck, or karma, or some cosmic punishment. It was me. I left the cafe, walking through the city streets until I reached my destination. A cheap motel. The same one Claire had met Ryan at, back when they thought they were being so careful. Room 214. I knocked. Silence. Then the shuffle of footsteps. The door cracked open. And there she was. Disheveled. Exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, her once perfect hair tangled from a night of no sleep. She was still in the clothes from the party, but now they were wrinkled, stained with mascara tears. For the first time in our entire relationship, Claire wasn't perfect. She just looked lost. Her eyes met mine, and for a long second, she didn't react. Like her brain couldn't fully process that I was standing there. Then, her face twisted into something between anger and desperation. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. I smiled. "I just wanted to see you." She let out a bitter laugh. "Are you enjoying this?" I tilted my head. "You tell me." Her lip trembled. "You ruined my life." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you mean the life you built by screwing me over?" She flinched. She knew I was right. I leaned against the doorframe. "You made your choice, Claire. You could have been honest. You could have left me. Instead, you lied. You stole. You let everyone believe you were some poor grieving widow while you played house with him." Her hands clenched into fists. "I loved him." I chuckled. "Yeah? How's that working out for you?" Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard, her shoulders shaking. "He's gone," she finally admitted. I already knew. Ryan had run. The second the cops started sniffing around, he did what all cowards do: he abandoned ship. He had left Claire to deal with the wreckage on her own. No money. No fianc. No future. It was perfect. She took a slow, shaky breath. "So what now?" I considered that for a moment. Then I shrugged. "Nothing." She frowned, confusion flashing across her face. "Nothing?" I nodded. I got what I wanted. Claire had always been waiting for the next move. She had spent her entire life manipulating people, playing games, twisting situations to fit her needs. But now, there was no next move. No fight to win. No lie to tell. No money to fall back on. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't exist to me anymore." And for Claire, that was the worst punishment of all. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway of her cheap motel room, staring after me with wide, empty eyes. I didn't look back. I never would. Claire didn't try to stop me. She just stood there in that cheap motel doorway, watching me walk away. For the first time in her life, she had nothing left to say. No manipulation, no clever excuse, no fake tears to get what she wanted. She was empty. And that was the last time I ever saw her. I didn't need to stick around to see what happened next. I already knew how it would play out. Claire had spent her whole life clawing her way up, using people as stepping stones, lying when it suited her, twisting reality to make sure she always landed on top. But she had nothing left to climb. The house was gone. Ryan was gone. Her friends had abandoned her. Her name was tied to a fraud case, and soon, she'd be in court defending herself from the legal mess I left behind. And the best part? She couldn't blame me. She had done this to herself. I walked away that day with no regrets. No second thoughts. No guilt. For the first time in over a year, I felt free. I left town that afternoon, got in my car, hit the highway, and didn't look back. I had already packed my things, set up a new life for myself elsewhere. A new city, a new name, a new beginning. I wasn't the same man who had driven away a year ago, leaving behind an empty car on a bridge. That man had died the moment he found Claire's text message. The man I was now? He had won. I drove for hours, letting the past shrink in the rearview mirror. No more revenge. No more plotting. No more waiting in the shadows, documenting every move, preparing for the final strike. It was over. Claire was just a memory now. And I was finally ready to start over. There's a certain silence that comes after revenge. Not the kind that feels empty or unfinished. Not the kind that leaves you wondering if you should have done more. No, this was the kind of silence that came with closure. I had spent over a year planning Claire's downfall, making sure every piece of her carefully crafted life crumbled around her. And now it was done. No more watching from the shadows. No more waiting for the right moment. Claire was buried under the weight of her own lies, and I was free. I settled into my new life easily. A small apartment in a new city, a quiet job that paid well enough, no loose ends tying me back to the past. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I was just living. It took some getting used to. For so long, my mind had been consumed by one thing: revenge. Every thought, every action had been leading to that moment when I finally took Claire and Ryan down. Now that it was over, I almost didn't know what to do with myself. But day by day, the past faded. I went for morning runs without checking if I was being followed. I sat in coffee shops without scanning the room for familiar faces. I slept through the night without waking up thinking about them. Then, one afternoon, something happened that told me for sure that I had finally moved on. I was walking through a bookstore, flipping through random paperbacks, when a woman next to me made a joke about how every thriller novel seemed to have the same 3 plot twists. I laughed. And then we kept talking. Her name was Olivia. She was funny, smart, had this easy way of speaking that made you feel like you'd known her for years. We talked for nearly an hour before she smiled and said, "I feel like I should ask your name before we end up debating books all day." And for the first time since I had vanished, I introduced myself without hesitation. Daniel. Not a fake name. Not an alias. Not an identity I had carefully crafted to hide who I was. Just Daniel. The man who had walked away. The man who had survived. The man who had won. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.